we realized that we can become an ecosystem. So once we build APIs, we can actually bring the pro investors in eToro, those are the 5,000 people being copied on eToro, to actually become app builders, right?
Today on Marketopolis, we're joined by the CEO and co-founder of eToro, that's ticker ETOR, company nearly 2 decades in the making and now publicly traded on the NASDAQ. Yoni started eToro at 25 with a mission to open global markets for everyone to trade and invest. Today, that platform serves 40 million registered users, and he's still as passionate as ever about making sure everyday investors have access to the same opportunities as the pros. A third-generation market enthusiast and lifelong trader, Yoni shares his philosophy on founder mode leadership, staying ahead of technological change, and why belief and perseverance are the two traits every investor and every CEO needs to get right. Let's get into it. This episode is brought to you by Enride, the company powering next-gen freight from the ground up. Electric trucks, autonomous driving, and AI optimization all on one platform. 30-plus global customers are already on board. Learn more at enride.tech. Hi, Yoni. Welcome to Marketopolis.
Thank you very much for having me.
Looking forward to diving into your story. You guys are recently public. We have a lot to talk about on that front. But maybe to kick things off, I'd love to hear about your origin story and how you guys started eToro nearly 2 decades ago and where that started and where you guys are now. So maybe if you give me a little bit of the backstory, we'll dive in there.
Sure. So I started the company with my older brother, Ronen. Since we were very young kids, it was always like he was the artist, then went eventually to study industrial design in the Royal College of Arts. I did computer science, master's in computer science. So that's like 20 years after. But even when we were kids, he used to paint D&D figures, and then I used to sell them at school. So it was like he's the product and I'm the hustler.
Okay.
And our father was a CEO of a publicly traded company that he founded called Magic Software. So we were always talking about the markets at the house. I think 3 decades later, we were the first company to actually list on NASDAQ, where sons of a father who listed on NASDAQ. It's the first time ever.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he it was a very proud moment for him and for us, of course. And then in the NASDAQ interview was the first time I've learned that he told the story where when he was a kid, his father, my grandfather, used to talk to him about the markets with the Herald Tribune. And then I told my father, this is the story I'm telling, being with you, and you're showing me the newspapers with the stock markets and stock quotes and explaining to me how the markets work. So from very young age, we were always talking about capital markets, seeing how my father is reacting to earnings himself. Interestingly, me and Ronen, my brother, sort of took it to different places. Ronen was always like, look, father is always every quarter he's stressed and he has earnings and the entire household and he needs to travel. And I was seeing exactly the same thing, but from a different light. I'm like, look at this excitement. There's a roadshow and there's, excitement, and we're making presentations. So it was interesting also to see that different perspectives when we were growing up. And when we were in he's me 25, he's 29, we sort of saw this opportunity almost 20 years ago of opening the markets for everyone to trade and invest in a simple and transparent way online. We saw the internet, of course. We were very heavy users. And so what we're doing on the internet, and then looking at how bank systems operated back then and still today, we said somebody has to fix here the user experience and start everything from scratch to make trading and investing accessible to millions, now to 40 million registered users in eToro.
Wow.
So that's how we started, with the concept of opening the markets for everyone. And then I'd say the interesting part, which I actually realized about 5 years ago when my deputy CEO joined us, and she told me, Yoni, you realize how many shifts in technologies you've been through, and every time you've been ahead of the curve. And we started desktop, then we launched the web trader before anybody else, like a flash-based web trader. Then we opened the social network, which sort of think about it 10 years before meme stock rally on Reddit, we had a social network in Europe where people are talking about stocks and copying top traders on the platform. Then we shifted to a mobile first approach in 2015. We started machine learning algorithms to pick the top investors on eToro in 2017, started building basically our quant and AI team almost 9 years ago. Started trading Bitcoin at $5 in 2011 and launching it in 2013, and Ethereum at $4 per ETH in 2017. And now, of course, AI. So a big part of eToro is taking that vision, which is opening the markets for everyone to trade and invest, and then taking I'd say up-to-date frontier technologies, implement them into eToro, and enabling more of our customers and more new customers in eToro to, again, always access capital markets and now generate potential alpha in capital markets.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. You guys have been very early on a lot of things, and you personally, I mean, 3 decades, and I love that.
20 years, not 30. I'm 45.
3 generations, not decades, 3 generations, your father, your grandfather, all in the capital markets. But yes, eToro for 2 decades. Curious, when you look at maybe the next decade as you build, what feels unfinished? You're now a publicly traded company. How do you think about that? What kind of continues to drive you as you build out this company and continue to grow?
I'd say 2 parts. When I look at, I say that a lot. We're now at like 4 million accounts, 40 million registered users, and about $20 billion roughly of assets on the platform. And my vision for eToro is building a $1 trillion asset manager. So when you look at like traditional banking, you'd see companies like Citibank, which are more in the payments rails, and banks like UBS or Goldman, which are more in the wealth management and trading business, right? So that's where I see eToro in the next 10, 15 years, is continuing to grow with our customers, to offer them everything from trading, investing, spending, and savings, with a focus on wealth management, with a focus on generating alpha and beta in the markets. I've been trading myself since I was 13, still very passionate about capital markets. I'm a very big believer in the opportunities of capital markets to unlock double-digit returns over time. My personal account in eToro is, I think, on about 30% returns average on the last 12 years. Wow, and a lot of the popular investors in eToro are there in the 25 to 35% returns. I think when I, admire and look at a lot of the investors I've met when we were going public, whether it's, people like Izzy from Millennium, or Stevie Cohen from Page 72, or David Tepper, who invested in our company, all the way to being invited to meet Warren Buffett at a dinner. Then, these are people who I admired since a very, very young age, and have been able to basically sort of manage capital markets to an art. And that's what's driving me, is like finding those tools, find technology tools, which is where I'm coming from, and enabling our customers to beat the markets, to join the markets, and eventually to beat the markets.
Yeah, I think we are in a new era of access to capital markets, and you guys have played a huge role globally in driving that. Your mission from the S1, opening the global markets for everyone to trade and invest in simple and transparent ways, I think is what we're seeing the effects of in today's market. And it's very powerful. I'm curious, as you're now on a quarterly cycle, you have to report earnings quarterly. You have a little bit more maybe administrative pieces as a public company. How does that change your ability to deliver on this mission? Does that become more challenging operating as a public company?
So since I founded eToro and we raised the first $1.7 million at roughly $5 million valuation, my father came to us and said, you now have shareholders, and you need to report to those shareholders from now on every quarter your P&L, product updates, and balance sheet. So, and interestingly, by the way, since then, my wife founded iAngels, who invested in more than 100 different startups, to realize that it's actually quite unique, the level of reporting we gave the first, I'd say, 16 years or 17 years of eToro as a private company. So I have a folder with almost 80 quarterly financials that I reported to our
Wow.
shareholders. So I got used to it. A lot of the cadence that we've built in eToro also were regulated financial institutions. So we're regulated in UK, Europe, US, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Australia, Seychelles, and soon Israel, and soon two others regions. And that cadence of being a regulated financial institution and learning how to be a regulated,
Hmm.
compliant financial institutions, plus going through also the SPAC process in 2021 and having EY as our auditors since 2010. So we were very well prepared for that moment of shifting from private to public.
Yeah.
I think the place where we're getting better and learning is communicating with public markets and learn how to communicate not only what you did, but what you plan to do. So I would say that's something where I look at some of the American sort of peers, companies like Tesla, companies like Google and Apple, and I still see we have that path to say, to have the public markets understand not only our financial performance, which has been awesome. First quarter, $110 million EBITDA profit on roughly $260 million top line. So great
Hmm.
financial performance plus 35% year over year growth in bottom line. But it's not only about that. So what you learn in public markets is you need to instill the sort of notion of where is growth coming from? Where's
Hmm.
double digit growth coming from in the next 5 years? And how much can public investors really understand your plans of capturing that growth, both believing in the secular trend, which we're a part of, which is the largest transformation in wealth in history, $120 trillion that are moving from older to younger generations, but also how do we position ourselves in that $100 trillion moving between generations to capture what I
Yeah.
think is a very realistic and moderate view, capturing 1 trillion out of those $120 trillion.
I think that makes a lot of sense in how you guys are telling your story. I've also noticed that you've taken a modern approach to how you actually message the mechanics, the playbooks around earnings. You guys are very social first, very digital, lean into content. You guys actually give retail a seat at the table at earnings. It feels like, which is in your DNA, I understand. But maybe tell us a little bit about that playbook and how that's evolved as you guys have gone quarter over quarter in reporting as a public company.
Sure. So we just celebrated 1 year being public. So
Hmm.
this was our fourth consecutive also beat.
Hmm.
And 3 out of 4 we did in New York. So one of them we did outside of New York. We were in the UK. And that
Hmm.
was the one where the share dropped. So I don't know whether it's coincidence or not, but we said, okay, let's actually do earnings in New York, meet investors, meet the analysts. I had a
Hmm.
great analyst meeting. So actually physically meeting 20 analysts in the room, roughly, everybody who's
Sure.
covering eToro. So, the cadence that we've built is make sure we do the live earnings. It's live on X, it's live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Then we do the live basically answers to both retail and to the analysts. And then we go from there to actually meet the public shareholders, our largest basically shareholders on the 13F,
Hmm.
and meet the analysts. And we
Hmm.
build that also around our US business. So at the same time, every quarter we're doing a US on-site. So at the same time that management is there for earnings, we're bringing in all of the US team into New York to strategize around the US business. So it's like all US focus, 2 weeks out of a quarter focused on earnings and US strategy.
I love that. And as a founder, going through these processes, you're now a public company's CEO and you're reporting quarterly. It sounds like you've been doing that before you were even public. But one of the questions we ask a lot of the guests that are founders is, what's something that they don't tell founders when you're going public? We've had a lot of different answers to that, but what's something they don't tell you? Maybe what's some advice for founders of late stage companies that are thinking about going public? What changes now that you're a public company CEO?
So it depends how many friends do you have that went public to whether you heard this or not. But one is a lot of over promises. We had this process with a SPAC in 2021. a
Hmm.
lot of overpromises on sometimes what I believe is unexpected valuations on revenue multiples. That was 2021. And so in many cases, the banks are in the business of selling you because
Hmm.
you are actually the product, right? So
Hmm.
there's this saying in social networks, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. What you learn in Wall
Yes.
Street is even when you are paying for the product, you're still the product. So,
Okay.
first of all, that's like, for every company going public, there's a lot of people around you to make a lot of promises because eventually everybody's making a lot of fees from this process.
Hmm.
So just people need to be aware that eventually, share prices up to public market investors' perception of the company, of the
Hmm.
growth of the company, and your financials, which is the multiple of your EBITDA, or if you're in extremely high growth revenues, right? So
Yeah.
I say this entire process is really more towards sort of getting out of the gate and becoming public.
Hmm.
Is really about you as the company being the product that the banks and everybody around you are selling. Second part is, you need to stomach volatility. I
Hmm.
think that, we went, which was amazing to see, by the way, one of the best moments in my life, like the opening of the market of the first day of
Hmm.
trading. So a lot of the public markets is in creating demand, right? So we
Yeah.
were building a $10 billion book for a $500 million. And
Wow.
it's about FOMO. So the more
Hmm.
people who come in and people in the street here, like I have friends in Wall Street, and they told me, we're hearing you're already at 5 billion. I'm like, I can't say anything. We're hearing you're at 6 billion. I can't say anything. So a lot of
Yeah.
like people expectations are, but for that first trade, right? So the
Hmm.
first trade went from 52 to we opened the market. So we were in a higher range, right? We went from 50 to
Sure.
52.
Yep.
The markets opened at 69 plus 69,
Wow.
69.69. That was the first price, which is because you're on the roadshow and you're
Hmm.
talking to a lot of people, and then demand sort of increases and people know that it's going to pop, right? So that's the first day pop of public markets, which is, again, it's just how the markets work. You look at IPOs, you see that first day pop, and then you suddenly see a bit of sort of a disappointment where you were at 69, you went from 52 to 69, now you're at 45. So
Yeah.
that volatility, again, I think some people tell me they're surprised to see how much I'm not getting excited personally by the share
Hmm.
price. And that is because I know eventually the real value of eToro shares comes from customers enjoying our product, us being able to deliver great products, though that translates into revenues and profits. And if those grow at double digits, then the stock price will follow. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that you don't need to manage Wall Street and capital markets and communications. Of course you do. And you always want to do it to the best possible way. But at the end of the day, it's really building great products, what builds great companies. And that volatility affects a lot of people, right? So that
Hmm.
volatility creates a lot of internal pressure in a company, which is something that you don't have as a private company where you fix the price and then it's fixed till your next round. But that's the cost of liquidity. The cost of liquidity is day-to-day price formation of your stock. And I think, by the way, I think companies in public markets dealing with crypto as well for the
Hmm.
last 15 years sort of trained people in eToro to weather storms
Hmm.
for the amplification and volatility of public markets. But I think founders need to be prepared to those volatile times.
Yeah, I think that's all really good advice and things that founders are learning in real time. And obviously, going from private to public, you're learning a lot of lessons evolving. Personally, for you, the landscape, a lot of fintech and trading platforms that came up alongside eToro, they either got acquired, they shut down, saw founders replaced once they hit public markets with new CEOs. You've been the CEO for the entire run. What do you do to continue to evolve, and how do you ensure that you are taking these lessons and also giving yourself the resources and foundation you need personally to continue to lead this company as it's grown into this giant?
I think it's a lot about adopting to change. I think founder mentality generally. Like I'm by the way, a very big believer in founder mode.
Hmm.
And sort of we have this smart portfolio on eToro called founder mode, which has been doing really well. So I'm a very big believer, especially again, talking about tech firms, but probably applicable to also non-tech firms in sort of that soul of the company. And a lot of the senior management have been with the company for more than 12 years. So very long tenure and corporate memory of our best people in eToro, and that it's all about adopting to change and change, and we've seen that changing from desktop to mobile, from mobile to the open web, from the open web, from web trader to the open web. Again, each of these technology, and now, by the way, the craziest by far change I've seen in my life with AI, it's about adopting to change and then understanding how do you adopt that change, what needs to change around you and how you manage the company. Do you want to take that next step of that change, right? So
Hmm.
crypto pushed away some people in eToro because they were like, I don't believe in that anymore, but I did and
Yeah.
continue to believe. So it's a lot of being sort of perseverance along your vision
Hmm.
and then adopting to change, which in many cases changes sort of styles of management, from from delegation to micromanagement, from being able to be 1,000 miles away to being in the details of every single thing. And I think that adoption to change is really the key to sort of lead the process of continuing to stay at the seat of founder mode. And second is what I tell people also about sort of part of our mission in capital markets. And I'd say, by the way, a lot of my beliefs around capital markets and around management are actually very similar. So
Hmm.
first of all, believe. You have to believe in what you do.
Hmm.
Second is you have to learn continuously about how do you make it happen. And third, you have to constantly experience and experiment and sort
Hmm.
of have that loop. And as long as you have that loop of believing, learning, and experimenting, you continue to grow. And it's super relevant, by the way, now with AI, right? So you have to believe that AI can be as good as you at everything you do. You have to learn how to operate AI and be willing to fail in that learning when you experiment and experience AI. And it's the same as being a good investor or a good trader. You have to believe in your capabilities. It took me 30 years in capital markets to actually meet the Oracle from Omaha, to after meeting him saying for the first time to myself in the mirror, I'm a great investor. And it's interesting because, I've devoted 30 years of my life to capital markets, but it took me that time to say, I'm a great investor. It's not luck, it's talent. What is that talent? What do I bring to the table? And I see it with many, many of the pro investors in eToro who grew as retail investors, always questioning, okay, I'm at 25% returns for the last 5 years. Is it luck or is it skill? And that's the part of believing, learning, and experimenting continuously that make you better at what you do continuously.
I think that's a good life philosophy, believing, learning, and experimenting. I think that could be applied to many areas of life. You mentioned AI. I know this is top of mind for almost every CEO, private or public, at the moment. Tell us a little bit about how eToro is applying AI. I know it's nothing new necessarily, but with the advent of LLMs, uh, tell us a little bit maybe on the product
Right.
side, even internally on the commercial side. How are you guys applying the stack? How are you deploying this type of technology?
So we were very early to AI. Actually, an interesting story is like how we became so involved in AI is
Hmm.
uh, we were we flipped the prospectus public, which means this is like when you were supposed to go on the road. And that was 2 days before Trump announced tariffs and Liberation Day. And then VIX spiked to 55, which is the highest since COVID. Robinhood stock fell, I think, to about $20. And the bankers basically told me, Yoni, you're done. There is no IPO. So for like 2 weeks after, like you work so hard, you work day and nights to build the
Hmm.
prospectus, to file the prospectus, to do your financials, and like banks basically told me, they don't even talk to us. There is no IPO right now. There's no IPO window. Nobody's IPOing. when VIX is above 40, not talking about 50. And
Wow.
then I sat down and I started programming again, but
Mhm.
with tools, with Cursor, with Replete.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, it's crazy. I can build things at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And I went to my R&D and I'm like, listen, this is crazy. Look at
Mhm.
what I'm building like with my own hands suddenly. And we started, and we have every roughly 3 to 6 months, we do hackathons in eToro. Every time there's like something new, we're creating a hackathon around it. And that was the moment where we said, okay, we need to sort of refocus the company on AI. And we built since then like APIs for eToro. APIs became MCPs, MCPs became CLI. We built the App Store because we realized that we can become an ecosystem. So once we build APIs, we can actually bring the pro investors in eToro, those are the 5,000 people being copied on eToro, to actually become app builders, right? And we then in October, about 6 months later, we announced the App Store. And then I saw the apps that the pro investors are building. And I was like, tears in my eyes, realizing that they're showing me features, which if I had to ask for that feature, my R&D and my product, they would tell me 5 man years, and it will cost us $1 million. And then I'm looking at one of our customers, and the customer has built that app for himself, then made it available to the rest of our customers. And these are super cool features. I can run you through them, but like, somebody built like a risk management office of 5 different agents that look at his portfolio and
Yeah.
giving his insights on their portfolio. Another person created actually the personas of Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch and Benjamin Graham and Kathy
Really?
Wood to look at
That's
his
fun.
portfolio and argue about his portfolio until they come to a resolution. So like, and I'm talking about 1,500 apps were developed. So a big shift was, okay, we're no longer just a UX of people actually clicking to trade. We're now building an ecosystem of API-driven trading of apps that both product managers and pro investors on eToro can build on top of eToro. We created an AI studio to actually enable basically people who never had experience in developing in their lives to actually build an app on top of eToro. And since then, just the last quarter, we launched Agent Portfolio, which lets you go into eToro to the Tori agent. So the Tori agent is now a frontier model, which was, by the way, one of the most important things we did is like willing to throw on your old technology. So we had the Tori agent of before and after Grok. And what we did is like, building technologies becomes so fast. So you need to be willing to throw the old technology, right? So the old technology was a Microsoft stack on top of a Google stack on top of a GPT 2.5. And we just took all of that and said, let's restart. Let's put the frontier model in front of the customer. And then suddenly everybody said, wow, it became so much smarter, of course, because suddenly Grok 4.2. Right. So it's, you need to constantly like take the new frontier technologies. Opus 4.5 in November changed completely the development lifecycle in eToro because it was the first time after, by the way, building a lot of infrastructure to support what I'm saying, where the best developers in eToro told me, Yoni, you were wrong at the time, but now you're right. It can actually write code as good as we can. That's the best developers in eToro. And once that sort of clicked, we shifted gears even to accelerate. So we're actually building now the entire eToro platform from scratch using AI. AI moved from 25% code written in eToro with AI to 95% code written in eToro with AI now. And we're seeing how AI is enabling us to accelerate the path eventually to build more products to our customers. I just came off a call with Santo Politi, who's been on my board for the past 13 years. And he told me, Yoni, this is the first time that you're delivering and bringing so many products to the market. You're like in front of what I can tell you, even like what to think about and what's next. And I feel the same in eToro. Like I'm every week getting like updates about products that our team built, and like it's running at a pace which I've never seen before, because we unleashed the capability of building products to product managers in eToro, to people in eToro's local offices across the globe, to pro investors in eToro, that are actually customers in eToro building on eToro. And now it's really about how do you take all of this and bring it to the customer in a great way, which I think AI is a big part of as well. Secondly, when I think of trading, I've always wanted to have a quant or be a quant or trade algorithmically since I'm about 15, 16. I've been crunching spreadsheets, I've been building algorithms, but the time required to actually build that and run that was so hard that I actually said, okay, it's better for us to be the brokerage.
Yeah.
But now suddenly I go to my OpenClaw fleet where I have 30 different agents of OpenClaw running on my WhatsApp. And I'm connecting it to eToro accounts and I'm like, build for me an options trading strategy. I want to collect yield on high volatility stocks, build 4 cron jobs, run it every 6 hours, pre-market, then execute, then before market closes, then calculate what you want to do tomorrow. And like, it goes into like, and it generated. Not that I necessarily think that's consistent or possible to replicate every 2 weeks, but last 2 weeks, one of these strategies generated for me 25% returns. The Momentum LS strategy on eToro, which is a long short strategy, generated for us 35% year to date. Leveraged alpha, a matrix portfolio generated, I think, about 52% return year to date. So something with using AI to actually manage more sophisticated trading, which could bear high risk. So don't go do it alone without doing your own research. But the capabilities of AI, trading algorithmically and opening that sort of continuous, again, since we started, it's all about democratizing financial markets. We're now democratizing quantitative trading that has been historically reserved for very sophisticated either people or sophisticated firms in Wall Street. We're now democratizing tools that I think maybe 3 to 10 firms in the world had access to 24 months ago, now are accessible to, suddenly 4 million customers in eToro.
On that point, what do you think that does to the markets as more and more retail investors are getting access to institutional grade tools, institutional grade capabilities? How does that change things? How does that shift the balance of power across our capital markets?
Well, I'm a very big believer in the ethos of the rise of retail investors. So when you're a retail investor, like myself, personally, I'm still a retail investor, right? I'm sophisticated and I've been doing this for a while, but I'm happy to invest in a strategy that might generate 50% returns, and I'm willing to take that risk. If you look at an institutional investor, you'll go now to a bank, Goldman, JP, an asset manager. They're looking at the benchmarking to the market, maybe plus 1%, plus 2%. Nobody wants, because an asset manager knows, and I know because my grandfather was a banker in wealth management. So, and he always told me, you bring customers when the markets go up, and then you preserve customers when the markets go down, and never lose money for a customer, because that's when customers leave you, right? So the entire world of institutional asset management is based on the notion that nobody wants to be nobody wants to take the risk of being below the benchmark, and nobody wants to take the risk of losing more money, because then the customers will leave you. So everything is very, very conservative in the way people think about risk management. Where if you think of the best investors in the world, David Tepper and Warren Buffett and Dan Loeb and Easy Englander and Point72 Stevie Cohen, they are all risk takers, right? So something in the world of traditional asset management has taken a very conservative route, while the biggest sort of moneymakers in the world know how to take more risk. And retail investors can take more risk, which is why I think over time, more and more funds are going. So if we think again of the $120 trillion moving from older generations to younger generations, most of that money right now is in asset management firms, insurance companies, and bank products. I think a lot of it is going to move to younger generations, to people who are saying, I want to make my own choices. I'm willing to take more risk. And that's a structural shift that has been happening in the market, but again, on still small amounts of money. Gen Y and younger generations still have less than 5% of wealth in the world. So think of that being 50% of wealth in the world, right? I think it's about 80% of wealth in the world right now is 60 plus years old. So think of that shift and how it shifts the market towards retail investors, toward taking more risk. What does that mean about the markets? We've seen an constant increase in two things over the past 20 years, which I think we'll continue to see, it's the increase of the average volatility or VIX of the markets over time. So more volatile times are ahead. And I also think we're going to see, which if you look at a moving average of the markets over the past, since 2008 and take a 3-year moving average window, you'd actually see that the returns of the markets of the S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 are actually accelerating, right? So they've been in a sort of a bullish market with some corrections but since 2008, there were corrections. 2022 was significant corrections. There will continue to be corrections. But I think what's happening is the rate of return are accelerating. The corrections are then becoming more volatile. But then retail investors, if you look at COVID and on tariffs, which is another great example, while institutional investors are getting out of the market when there's sort of a risk on, the first thing an institutional investor does is, okay, is this 2008 again? Get some cash, which then leads to more and more drops. And what are retail investors doing? They're buying the deep. Right? They're buying the deep in crypto. They're buying the deep in semiconductor stocks when they fall down. They're buying the deep in tech stocks when they fall down. And I think that will continue to scale. And what that means is beta has shifted into retail investors. And I think what we're going to see now with AI is alpha is going to shift into retail investors as well.
Yeah, I think all of that directionally is the trend that we're seeing. Maybe zooming into eToro, how do you think retail has discovered you guys? It's both as customers and investors. I'm curious, have you guys seen that convergence? Do you feel like your users are potential shareholders as well, given that they're already in the market? And then also being a public company, is that driving more user conversion because people are discovering you as a stock?
So first of all, we see our customers buying eToro, which is great. We also did actually something interesting is when we went public, we told our private shareholders that they could actually get their shares on the eToro platform. So we see that as well. Sort of existing shareholders of eToro became customers of eToro, then selling some eToro shares to buy other products on eToro, which is great. I think we have not yet caught up to the retail investor trend in the US. And I think a part of that is our business. We sort of paused the business in the US. So we launched in 2021. Then there was a very negative regulatory environment for crypto. We said, let's get out of the US. Let's sit on the sidelines until there's better weather, a better regulatory weather in the US, which now definitely is the best possible tailwind we could ever ask for around crypto and around stocks and around innovation. Now the day trader pattern rule. So we're seeing much, much, much better regulatory environment in the US, but we just started in the US. You can even say that we're 1 year old and we're 20-year-old almost company. We're 1 year old in the US. Since our IPO, we said, okay, let's restart the US business. Let's start scaling up the US business, but it's 1 year versus 20 years of legacy. And I think that part is very much still in its infancy. As we scale our business in the US, I do believe we will see that convergence between retail investors we'll have in the US and retail investors that are driving also eToro shares.
And related to that, how do you think about communicating to the modern marketplace? We're seeing a lot of CEOs utilize X, YouTube, you guys live stream your earnings, but there's this direct access that you can get. Right. And a lot of the conversations, as you guys know, given eToro, the social component of your app is in these different communities, whether it's in eToro or Reddit or Discord now. How do you think about communicating to these emerging communities of investors?
So we are doing a lot of that, and that's why we do our sort of earnings on X, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. So we're activating the same channels of eToro for acquiring customers for earnings as well. So I would say we're communicating with the public. I still think, as always, you're learning as you grow. And I think there's much to learn from the greatest companies in the world around communication and communication with both retail investors but also consumers in general. So I think there's always a place for us to do things smarter and better, especially now with AI. We're rebranding now eToro, so we're building the app from scratch.
Hmm.
We're rebranding the eToro brand, which we plan to launch in Q3 this year. So a new brand,
Okay.
a completely new app, a lot of
Hmm.
new products in the App Store. And a
Hmm.
lot of that is being done by AI, right? So
Hmm.
shifting also the mindset to let AI guide us throughout that process of communicating and how to communicate the story of eToro in our marketing comms.
And thinking about communicating to the markets, we're coming up to the end of the interview. I'm curious, when you look at companies out there that you think are doing it well, you mentioned Tesla, you mentioned, I think Google. Are there other companies that you feel like are doing a good job communicating specifically to retail and utilizing social when it comes to public markets?
I see some of them. I think Limited is doing a great job. Colleagues of ours, I
Yeah.
think Monday are doing a good job as well. I think, we're looking at companies. I think SoFi is doing a good job. So again, we're looking at a lot of different companies. Again, because I'm a very active investor myself, you can go and look at my portfolio. I
Yeah.
think is then I'm also looking and learning how do other companies doing it and how they communicate.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies that are on the bleeding edge. I think Lemonade is a great example. They really have a strong engagement model with their shareholders. And we have some fun questions that we like to ask. So, do you remember the first maybe stock or public equity that you bought?
Yeah,
I
I
assume
remember
coming from
very
three
well.
generations of it, you had a lot of early exposure.
So I don't know if it's the first trade, but like one of my first trades
Hmm.
was pair trading AMD and Intel. And I
Okay.
remember AMD was at $4, Intel was at $80.
Hmm.
And I looked at that price. This was like 97, I think. And
Hmm.
I was like, there are only two chip manufacturers in the world. How come one of them is worth $100 billion and the other one is worth four? And I
Hmm.
remember constantly looking at the price, sort of, okay, if it gaps, then I'll close the trade. And if it
Hmm.
widens, I'll do that trade again. And then it moved into options trading on that trade. Like I was like obsessed with the trade. Unfortunately, after the dot-com bubble, I lost that trade and didn't do it again because eventually AMD is now like four times, I think, bigger than Intel. So I could have done
Yes.
like 100x on that trade if I continued it. Which again leads me to say, believe in your your conviction trades
Yeah.
and do it over time.
And looking at, obviously you spend a lot of time in the eToro app, but how do you track your stock? Are there other apps? Do you get a daily email as a public company CEO? I'm curious. Like you're a trader, you build a trading business. Like
I'm
how do you
doing
track your
everything,
own
yeah. But
stock?
but I'm on eToro, so of course everything I do is on
Of
eToro,
course.
and I now I also have the new eToro app, so I'm doing it on both eToro apps, the old one and the new one, to continuously compare. And we bought Delta, which is a price tracking and portfolio tracking, so I can actually connect all of my crypto accounts plus my everything connected to Plaid, like
Yeah.
my other brokerage and bank accounts. So I go into three of my apps: Delta,
Yep.
Portfolio Tracker, Toro, and eToro AI, all apps available to see the eToro performance, but also other companies, of course.
And you have everything you need. So perfect. I love that. Looking at where you guys are at today, if you had a message for retail investors, and this could be about eToro or just more broadly for retail, what would be a message that you would give them today in this evolving, fast-paced, changing world?
Again, very much sort of continuing the believe, learn, experiment with AI.
Yep.
Like the I have never seen technology running at that speed.
Hmm.
Trust it, like, and in order to trust it, you have to continuously believe, learn, experience. And every time there's a new model, say
Hmm.
something failed, okay, I'm going to try it again with a new model. I'm going to
Hmm.
try it again with a new software. I tried to do a video, it didn't work. A month later, there's a new model, try it. Because I see a lot of people throughout the process of experimentation failing and then giving up. So you can't give up on AI, and just make sure you experiment and learn continuously.
Lastly, on our side, looking out, let's say 5 years, what are some non-financial KPIs that will tell you that the strategy is working for eToro? What will that look like, feel like? I know 5 years is a very long time in today's age to think about, but I'm
Right. I think,
curious.
again, it's still a financial because everything in eToro is financial, but the number of funded accounts and the assets under
Okay.
administration are two of our main KPIs, right? Alongside top line and bottom line. So that's definitely something we're constantly looking at. And the other thing is, which is more internal, which is engagement of customers. And engagement of customers is everything around how many products do each of our customers own. And we see that the more products they use of eToro, the higher their lifetime value and increased share of wallet. And engagement generally is also about MAU DAO and how many monthly active users, how many daily active users. So these are a lot of things we continuously track on eToro to make sure that our customers, as well as NPS, are enjoying our products and continuously using them more and more.
Well, I learned a ton, incredibly valuable advice and information you shared today. Appreciate the time, Yoni. Excited to watch you on your journey, and definitely would love to have you come back on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yoni. Thanks to Enride, powering next-gen freight with electric, autonomous, AI-driven shipping. Enride.tech.